All right, Chelsea. This was a midweek match, February 3rd, the second leg of the semifinal. We beat them 1-0, bringing our aggregate victory to a 4-2 margin over Chelsea. So that's always good, mopping the floor with those guys a little bit.
I don't know what you're talking about. I saw a tactical masterclass from Chelsea, and they won that game 0-1. That's what I saw.
Who are you listening to?
Well, I mean, so apparently now again, of course, we live in the U.S., so we got the Carabao Cup is on Paramount, so their CBS, well, sort of CBS, not the Champions League crew. It's a different set of people. Apparently, it was much more so on the broadcast in Europe. This in England, that was a lot of the commentary. Apparently, it was about just the tactical brilliance of Chelsea's decision to try not scoring in a game that they trailed. I will say this. I get it. Like, from Chelsea's perspective, I think that the plan is actually fairly straightforward. Like, keep the game 0-0 as long as possible and try to nick a goal on a counter or push late, and try to get it to 1-0, get it to extra time, and then maybe to penalties. Like, right. I don't think I get that idea. I don't think it's a bad idea, all things considered. But obviously it didn't work.
Right.
I also don't think it was any sort of like masterful tactical performance. Arsenal was perfectly content to take the air out of the ball and make that game. I mean, let's be honest. That game was pretty dull. Mm-hmm. That was I mean, I shouldn't say it wasn't a fun watch. It was a very fun watch given how it ended, but it wasn't exactly it's not going to get framed in the club's illustrious history of classic matches. It was a workmanlike performance, but again, Chelsea came out with 5 guys in the back. What did we think was going to happen?
Right.
They needed a goal, and they basically played to win 1-0. And I kind of get it, right? I think it's an admission of I guess we'll say it, inferiority. Arsenal's just better than them. I mean, I think they walked in and said the best result for us is the best result obviously is to win 1-0, because if we try to score 2, we're definitely giving up 1. I think there's a sense there that they don't have, that if they try to go, think what we've seen in the Champions League, when you got teams that try to open up against us, we're just too good.
Yeah.
And they just don't have, they essentially didn't trust themselves to win a shootout, which is fair enough. And so they basically said, well, let's make it 0-0 as long as possible and try to nick one at the end. And it kind of bit them. But I mean, I get it. But I did think it was interesting listening to the way some of that was talked about. And again, it doesn't really matter because the commentators don't actually impact what's happening on the field. But it is a little bit like, why are we giving them so much credit for losing? I mean, this goes back to when we played them at Stamford Bridge, back at before Christmas, right? Chelsea beats Arsenal 1-1. It's weird how that takes place, because for all of their desperation and all the sense they needed a goal, Chelsea didn't have a shot on goal after the 7th minute.
Mm-hmm.
Not the 77th minute, not the 87th minute, not even the 47th, not the 7th. 7 minutes into the game was last time they had a shot on goal. The best they had is they had that dangerous free kick kind of at the top of the box, ends up hitting into the wall, and effectively that was that. Mm-hmm. Frankly, the game could have been over a little earlier. There was that tackle on Martinelli in the penalty box, which I found a little.
Yeah. We've
talked about this before. Chalobah gets the ball. Getting the ball is not exculpatory. And you could easily argue he drags his leg to clip Martinelli afterwards. Had we conceded late there, I think we would have had a pretty good argument that we got hosed. Yeah. But in the end, we didn't. And in the end, Kepa Arrizabalaga, a former Chelsea player, has a nice game. Had a nice save, a couple of good, good times going after the ball in the box. And then, starts this possession. He gets up to Kai Havertz, former Chelsea player. And then he tugs the badge. I mean, like, I'm only sorry Madueke didn't get a foot in on that one. Yeah. But just.
So what I'm hearing from you is we basically stole their strategy. Keep it 0-0 as long as possible and then score at the last possible minute.
I mean, in a sense, right? Their job is to effectively try to break down the strongest defense in Europe, because that's who we are, right? That's what they're facing,
Mm,
and like what they essentially signed everyone up for was an hour, 70 minutes, 60 to 70 minutes of basically nothing happening.
right. Which I get where
Yeah,
you're coming from. Like that doesn't make sense when you're starting off with a deficit, when you're already behind. Like we've seen what happens in a one leg match when
yeah,
you get behind, you push forward. You end up opening up the game because you
yeah.
acknowledge that you need to score. And it's just weird that that was absent.
Right, and yeah, again, I get it. Like, I think it's a defensible decision on the part of Rossinier, the manager. I get it, and I'm not necessarily going to be critical of Chelsea there per se. I'm sort of more kind of curious at the way that that's been kind of talked about in the broader context. It's just
Yeah.
like it was the best they could offer, and what's the line from Twisted Sister? If that's your best won't do.
Yeah. Yeah, really. No, it's true. And we're seeing that so much with so many clubs that we play.
Yeah. We're the best team in Europe, right? I mean,
Yeah.
how can you argue otherwise at this point?
Well,
Doesn't
and
mean we're
like,
going to win anything,
yeah,
which is
and like
obviously
I've
what we
said,
want to do. But yeah,
I've said before, I mean, best team in Europe, pretty inarguably. And to me, Europe is the best confederation in the world. It's hard to argue that Arsenal is the best club in the world at this point, you know?
at this point, there really isn't any. The honestly, the closest competitors you might argue, I guess closest competitor you argue would probably be Bayern Munich. We beat them 3-1. You know,
Yeah, really.
I think Barcelona has a shout too. You go into the Champions League and there's a bunch of clubs that we look at and go, okay, yeah, they could. But right
Yeah.
now, only one team went 8 for 8 in the Champions League. Only one team is still fully alive, and all four and is the betting favorite in all those competitions. I mean, yeah, I don't.
It's also cool, like we're early enough in the league phase that this doesn't necessarily mean as much as it might had this happen in 5 to 10 years, but we're the first club to have a perfect record in the league phase too. That's really cool. That's something to definitely be proud of. And, if this format sticks around long enough, that can be meaningful. Like, that's the yardstick against which other strong clubs will be judged in the future, including future iterations of Arsenal.
Maybe I'm not going to put too much stock in that one in general. No? I mean, the job of the league phase is to get yourself into the top 8, and I think as long as you do that, you've had a successful league phase. Let me rephrase that. If you're a club like Arsenal, if you're a club like Manchester City, Liverpool, Real Madrid, Barcelona, Bayern, if you're one of these teams that enters the Champions League and says, Paris Saint-Germain, and says to yourself, "Yeah, we should win. We should win this." Then yeah, I think your goal in the league phase is top 8. After that, kind of gravy. And for other teams, just getting into the knockout round it would be considered relatively successful. But like, I think Real Madrid Real Madrid is probably looking at this being in the knockout, having to play in the knockout round, play those extra games. I think they're looking at that and they're not particularly thrilled about their position.
Right.
But, Real Madrid also has dark magic in the Champions League and could be it wouldn't shock me if they were in the final just because they're Real Madrid and they go to the Champions League final.
Yeah. Some Galactico voodoo or something. Who knows?
It's funny that they're the ones who are the forerunners of the Super League, which would effectively destroy / replace the Champions League. Like, of all the competitions you want to do, it's the one you actually are truly... It's the one that's made you Real Madrid. But anyway.
Yeah. So there's apparently some effect on our down the road schedule in the Premier League based on advancing to the final, right?
Yes. So that weekend, the League Cup final is scheduled for Sunday, March 22nd. That'll be at Wembley. We were originally scheduled on that weekend. It was still on Saturday. Maybe would have shifted via TV for other reasons. We were originally scheduled on that Saturday to go to be away against Wolves. That of course was not going to happen. We're not going to play 2 games in a weekend like that. But apparently it was announced before the game, and I didn't even see it till afterwards because they had seen how the schedules played out. If Arsenal beat Chelsea, which they did, the Wolves game has now been rescheduled to the 18th of February, which means we still have 2 more weeks of 2 games per week, which, by the way, has been the story for us, really for all of 2026, and actually the last week or so of 2025. So it's what when we play Spurs on the 22nd. After that is our first true break. Until we get a full week off before our next game, which it's again the Wolves game could be rescheduled there because that is actually one of the a spot for a Champions League playoff round game. So because we didn't have there, we had the space.
Right. So instead of getting a break that week, we're just playing a preferred match. Yeah.
But I have to say, overall, I actually like this because it lessens the congestion we're going to get in the back end of the season.
Right.
Like the fear really is that Wolves game then gets kicked down to later, like to April or early May.
Right.
But for a lot of reasons, like the goal is to get that thing out of the way as quickly as possible so that it's not, holding things up there. If anything, it'll probably help us if we were to get a result, if we get a win in that game, it basically gives us another extra set of points against the teams chasing us in the league race. Again,
that's true.
Ahead of ourselves in there. But anything.
It's like the opposite of having a match in hand. It's like having a leg up over virtually everybody for a while.
There's nothing wrong with having the game in hand.
Yeah.
But I would much prefer the points in hand. It's not that you've played the extra game. It's that you won that extra game and you had those extra 3 points, and now the team chasing you has to win that extra. So.
Right. No, true. So yeah, this is exciting. We're heading to the final.
Yeah. I'll ask you really quickly. This is obviously we're still about a month and a half away, but you're getting set for your first trip to Wembley.
Yeah.
Metaphorically speaking, of course. You're not actually going, but you're about to see Arsenal go to Wembley
plans,
for the first. Yeah, you're about to see Arsenal go to Wembley for the first time. How does it feel?
That's cool. I don't know that it's totally sunken in. I think not having seen it before, it's tough to say. Like, I guess I'm excited. I think it's kind of like the more minor of the competitions that might send us there. It's actually funny. While on vacation, I was talking to somebody who was a Manchester City fan, and he was remarking on like, well, why is it that Manchester City seems to play their least experienced, most junior players in these matches? I was like, well, it's funny you should ask, because apparently it's classically been considered a youth competition, and a lot of clubs play it that way. And, we see like Kepa, who isn't a youth player, but Kepa being like our cup keeper. We have some of our more junior players that play and stuff. And he said, yeah, well, Newcastle didn't play it that way. I said, yeah, a lot of clubs don't. But
yeah, I mean, right. It's not so much that it's classically a youth tournament. It's that especially when you're a club like City, and and by this point in the competition, like City was rolling out some of their top players too. You saw we had a pretty strong lineup here as opposed to when we played Port Vale back in the 3rd round when we started this thing. So, the closer you get to the trophy, like it would not shock me to see Raya in goal for the final.
Right.
I don't know that that's the case. Maybe Arteta feels comfortable with Kepa, but it wouldn't shock me to see Raya, in the final, because and you're going to see a strong line, especially given it's City we're going to play, and we'll talk more about that game as it gets a little bit closer. But I think that's going to be a big one. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, no, I am excited. I mean, it's been a bunch of frustration the last few years seeing us get so deep and so close, getting to quarterfinals and semifinals and never quite making it there. So definitely that is really cool. And I think it just hasn't fully sunken in yet what it'll be like. So, more on that after it's over, I suppose.